So, Father Murr, would you tell us what brought you to Rome and ultimately what brought you to ordination?
Study of philosophy. I wanted to study philosophy, and I wanted to study classical philosophy. I did not want to study modern philosophy. I wanted to study Aristotle, primarily. A lot of reasons for that, but I'm going to keep those to myself. I was interested in studying law, and I wanted all of the lawyers that I knew, friends of our family, all had degrees in philosophy. That's the way it was then.
So you went to Rome not to be a priest, but to be a lawyer, basically.
I went to Rome to study philosophy. To become a lawyer.
And then you go to the Mexican college, which was the Mexican residence. You meet Marini. He is vital to your decision to become a priest. And then who were you ultimately ordained for, Father?
Encapsulized that beautifully. I was ordained for a diocese in Mexico called San Juan de los Lagos. It was part of Guadalajara, and just 2 years before I was ordained, they split Guadalajara into two parts, Guadalajara being one and San Juan de los Lagos being the other. And the Bishop of Guadalajara, Archbishop of Guadalajara, went to San Juan de los Lagos, and he invited me to study and be ordained for his diocese. But it was with the idea of staying in Rome. It wasn't with the idea of going to Mexico.
I see. For your whole life, that was kind of the idea.
Yeah, the thing is that to be ordained a priest, you need a bishop. And this bishop was willing to ordain me and to gift me, if you will, to the Holy See.
I see.
To work with Marini.
Okay. And you'd be still teaching at the Mexican college, or would you be working in the Holy See in the
teaching
offices?
days would be up.
Okay.
No, along with study days. After I finished a doctorate, would be good to go into the Secretary of State with him. That was the plan.
So you didn't expect, I think you used the word naive in one of your books, you didn't expect to come across tremendous levels of scandal in Rome in the 1970s when you were ordained.
Not really. As a matter of fact, I considered Rome to be the holiest place on earth.
Yes.
Center of not only of Catholicism, but the nearest place that you would get to God dwelling.
Of course we're Catholics. That's exactly how we see it. So, Father, what happened when you are working in Rome? Just give us a recap of Cardinal Gagnon and what he had been working on in discovering the infiltration of Freemasons into the hierarchy.
Cardinal Gagnon was the rector of the Canadian College, and Archbishop Gagnon at the time.
I see.
And Benelli, Cardinal Benelli, Archbishop Benelli at the time, the Secretary of State, saw in him a potential help in a lot of fields. Gagnon was a theologian, but he was also a canon lawyer and a moral theologian at that. So he was called in by Archbishop Benelli, who was the Sub-Secretary of State, on a lot of projects that the Vatican had. And one of them was in 1975. If you read my book, I'm not going to go into all of that, but if you read my book, you'll see the why of it and how the logistics of it. In 1975, Pope Paul VI called Archbishop Gagnon to do an investigation of the entire Roman Curia, all of the offices of the Pope. Everyone who worked for the Pope in Vatican City was to be investigated by Gagnon. And there was a special emphasis in that investigation on corruption. But I've got to tell you this, just an aside, when we talk about corruption in 1975, we are not talking about anything like the corruption today. I mean, believe me, it was this kind of corruption did not exist. Or if it did, we certainly didn't know about it. It's better Gagnon.
It's better hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think it was. I don't think it was as existing.
I agree.
Right? Anyway, Gagnon accepted that. You always accept something that the Pope assigns you to, and he began that investigation with an emphasis on Freemasonry. Why? Because there was already infiltration in the Vatican of Freemasons, and read the book.
Then I really enjoyed Murder in the 30th Degree. One of the questions I came away as I read it was, but how do you test if someone's a Freemason? I mean, you don't get fingerprints, you don't come in and say, "Are you a Freemason?" Because anybody in the
well,
curia
yes and no, because I'll tell you why.
How do you test that?
Because two people already, prior to the beginning of the investigation, were accused by members of the curia, by two cardinals actually, of being Freemasons, and documentation was presented.
I see.
So that's what got the ball rolling. And it got the Pope, Paul VI, who wasn't easily excited, or excitable, I should say, got him interested in investigating the roots of this, if it was true, and how deep. One of the people that he got documentation on, who was involved in Freemasonry, was Bugnini, Annibal Bugnini, who designed our new Mass.
And the other 6 new sacraments.
Yes, and the other six new sacraments, and also Cardinal Sebastian Baggio, who was the prefect for the Congregation of Bishops. So he had his assignment. He knew what he was looking for.
So here you are, a young priest. It's 1978 in Rome, and you are working for Cardinal Gagnon, Archbishop Gagnon at the time. What is your technical role?
I just helped him. Mm-hmm. That was my technical role. I just helped him. I was still doing my doctoral studies at the Gregorian University. Mario Marini and I were living at the Lebanese residence. Okay, now that's very important, and you'll understand why in a moment. But we were living there, and I was ordained a year and a half before. Gagnon preached preached at my ordination. Right, he preached in French, English, Spanish, and Italian. Right, beautiful, and we're shirt-tail cousins. All of the French Canadians are shirt-tail cousins, right? The Letourneau family is my family. We're related to the Gagnons, who knows what. So we always had kind of a jokeable relationship, right? And Gagnon, while he was doing this investigation, I mean, we socialized and everything. I knew him well. But during the investigation, the investigation began in 75, so in 77, right after, not long after my ordination, during this investigation, his rooms were ransacked, broken into and ransacked, and many of the papers of his investigation, especially those referring to Freemasonry, were taken, right? Sure. Nothing else was taken. The documentation was taken. That happened at one time. His life was threatened, and also his offices at San Callisto were broken into at night and ransacked, exactly for these documentations.
And it's like that phrase, you always take the most heat over the target. Clearly, if this was just a conspiracy theory that there were Freemasons in the Roman Curia, he would be no threat.
No, none whatsoever.
No threat at all.
No.
One of the surprising parts about your book is how several popes demurred, that he's ready to present, and then Paul VI says, I'm going to die, I don't want to see this. John Paul I, correct me if I'm wrong, but he is the murderer in the 33rd degree.
He is the murdered.
Murderers, rather,
yeah.
Sorry. Murdered in the 33rd degree. And then John Paul II demurs. Cardinal Gagnon gets so fed up, he goes to the jungles of Colombia for pastoral work, to work as a priest. And if I remember from your book correctly, after Pope John Paul II was shot, the very first thing he said was, bring me Gagnon. Is that correct?
He said, find Gagnon.
Find Gagnon.
He'd come out of his coma and wanted Gagnon immediately. Gagnon returned to Rome. He met with the Holy Father, because Gagnon had also told him that the investigation showed that there was an assassination attempt, an assassination plot against his life.
Now, why do you think John Paul II ignored it? Was this part of the John the 23rd, let's not listen to the prophets of doom business?
I don't know. I think John Paul II had a very strange personality, a unique personality, let me put it that way, not strange. It was different. And I believe that he was all gung-ho on converting the world, and I think maybe thought that nothing would stand in his way.
Mm.
See, it's the idea that he gave you. He was in total control.
Yes.
When Gagnon warned him that there was, I think there were plots against his life, and he had concrete evidence, not just in general, he didn't want to listen to that.
He just wanted rose colored.
Yeah. Everything is wonderful, it's fine, thank you very much. Well, Gagnon said, my work here is done. I want to get back to being a real priest.
And I think you and Gagnon and Marini like Pope John Paul II a lot more than I do at this point, but even then, you or Marini or Gagnon said in your book, John Paul II's 3 goals was 1, ending communism behind the Eastern Bloc, 2, traveling the world, and 3, reforming the Roman Curia. Did I get that correct from your book?
I would say John Paul II was not interested at all in the reformation of the Roman Curia.
So off the list at all.
No, I don't believe that.
So you as a young priest, here you are in Rome, you have a front row seat to everything that Gagnon is doing his investigation on, a possible murder of John Paul I, then John Paul II is shot, Gagnon comes back. This is a tough question, so forgive me for asking, but why do you think God had you in this front row seat to see this corruption in Rome? We'll get to the other parts of your life later, but just at least for that and how that set the stage for.
That's a very, very good question, as a matter of fact. And the honest answer is, I have no idea.
I was afraid you'd say that.
You were afraid of me to say it, but I'm being honest. Here's the thing.
What's your least bad guess?
That's my least bad guess. Something that's very important about this whole thing was that after Gagnon's offices and bedroom were ransacked and there was a threat against his life made, a serious one that he went to the police with, he moved in with Mario Marini and myself to the Lebanese restaurant. I always say Lebanese restaurant. Lebanese
what do you think
residence.
About, Father?
I'm thinking about Kibinaye. Anyway, he moved into the residence with us. And there's a very good reason for that. If you read the book, you'll see the reason, because of
security.
Capucci.
The security.
And
there.
the security, which
I remember
was phenomenal, right?
Yes.
So we were together, the 3 of us, very much. And we had a camaraderie. It was very good. Why was I there at the time that I was there? I don't know. You know, I suppose that many times we think there are providential reasons for things in our life. I think the friendship that I developed with Gagnon and the spiritual support was phenomenal. Also with Marini, and with different friends. We had a community of we had our own little mafia. We didn't call it a mafia, but it was a good group looking toward reform of the church. We were all concerned for reform of the church. We knew that, and there were different members of the Secretary of State who were with us, and people
even as a young priest, you understood this was important.
And I was the youngest, and an American at the same time, so it was an odd fit.
If I had to guess why it was the case, I think it would be for now. I would believe that you had to go through that for your presence on LifeSite News, the ultra corruption going on in Rome right now. It gave you a vision to say, well, it helps prevent you from saying, oh, we've always had problems in Rome like the Borgia popes. You understand we're at a fever pitch of corruption that we've...
Yes.
At least doctrinally, we've never seen this before.
After I finished 2 books, the first one that you're taken with, I never liked particularly. I thought there was always something wrong with it.
Society of Judas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second book was about Mother Pasqualina. In all of this, Mother Pasqualina is a very dear friend of mine and is informing me about how things were during the pontificate of Pius XII, 11th and 12th, right? So I've got a point of reference that probably nobody had. I finished a book on her in 17.
And Father, let's give the listeners a little background. This is fascinating because the right-hand woman of Pius XII was a very close friend of yours after he had died.
She was my godmother for ordination, hence the book. The name of the book is The Godmother.
Now, those of us who've been ordained in the United States don't understand godmother for ordination. Explain that.
The Latinos, the Latins, have I can see smiles already. Anyone who's a Latino understands a godparent. When you get married, you have godparents. When you get baptized, you have godparents. For everything you have in life, you have godparents. And sometimes, for example, when you get married, there are godparents of the ring, godparents of the pillows that you kneel on, godparents of all of this.
I didn't know that.
And those godparents, it's a big social thing. Okay. And you're godparents for the rest of your lives. And you call each other comadre and compadre. Wow. Comadre, compadre in Italian,
it's
right?
Beautiful, though.
It is. But it's all about relationships.
Yes.
And maybe we don't understand that a lot.
We're very individualistic in the United States.
But Mother Pasqualina, there was a custom years ago of having a godparent also for ordination. Right? So I asked her to be my godmother. She smiled and accepted. She knew exactly what I was talking about. And she provided me with at my ordination with the Sistine Choir Chapel, the choir, right?
Wow.
The Pope's choir. She got that was her ordination gift. So I've got Mother Pasqualina over here. I'm living with Archbishop Gagnon, who's a brilliant man.
And you were going to talk about Mother Pasqualina and corruption that she had seen.
No, what I was going to tell you about was the second book I wrote was about Mother Pasqualina.
Right.
And about what she said. And then I came to this. I said, before I die, and for some reason, don't even ask me why, but I had in my head that I was going to die at 72. For
Past
years.
that. You're past that, right?
I'm past that. There's something wrong. My plan didn't work. But anyway, before I died, I wanted to write what happened to Gagnon during this investigation, what this investigation was about. Why? Because I was already seeing more than I could imagine of corruption in the Roman Curia, in the Vatican, and in the highest echelons of the church. I was seeing it already. And I'm thinking to myself, where did this begin that I know of?
Yes.
Right? It might have begun in the 17th century, but where did it begin that I knew of myself? And I knew about it beginning there. The corruption, the infiltration of Freemasons, that was there. So I decided to write this story about what happened to Gagnon. And I had a front row seat. What happened? I was part of what was happening. And that's why I wrote the book. But the book was written so that truly, my intention anyway, was that people would understand today what began back then.
Yes.
Its beginnings. The level of corruption, as I just got done saying, I think is ne plus ultra. I've never seen anything like this.
That's right.
But it began long before this.
I think it's important to actually name times, because if you go ad absurdum or ad nauseum, you can go all the way back to Adam and Eve, okay. Or you could say Judas or whatever, but I think we have to actually pinpoint when the attempt to take over the hierarchy of the Catholic Church crystallized as a real plan, not just an amorphous plan. Dr. Taylor Marshall puts it in the 1850s in his book Infiltration. We can't just say it was Adam and Eve or it was Judas or even it was the Protestant revolt. I really think we need to say, but when was there a crystallized plan to take over the hierarchy?
When was the election of Pope Pius X?
Was it 1898, 1903?
Let's say 1900.
Okay,
Just
right around 1900.
It was around 1900. You know that Pius X was not the first to be elected, right?
Right.
The one before him was Cardinal Rompali. And Cardinal Rompali gave up the election because it was brought to everyone's attention during the conclave, during the voting, after he had won the election, that he was a Freemason.
Incredible.
Right?
Incredible.
Right? Just imagine.
And was it the Holy Roman Empire that blew the whistle on this?
Yes. It was the Austro-Hungarian emperor.
What do you think about secular authorities having a play in the decision of Catholic hierarchy?
You know, I was against it up until recent times. I'll tell you why. Because Cardinal Gagnon was fond of calling a lot of the cardinals, and especially those in power, the scoundrels. And he was being Christian. the scoundrels.
Right, that was it.
And he had a very good point. They were scoundrels.
Yes.
And I think that when you have a group that's closed in on itself, that's kind of dangerous. If it's open to other influences, checks and balance.
There is not that in the Roman system, but most governments, if they're not corrupt, have something of checks and balances.
Yes, yes. There's a problem when anything is closed on itself. That's all. And I think some influences. I would like very much in a conclave that there be an independent source within to make sure that things were done correctly.
To make sure this I mean, as long as it wasn't like the fact checking for a Trump Kamala type thing, you'd have to.
No, you'd want an honest,
an objective one.
Yes,
indeed.
You'd want it objective.
So, Father, you were ordained for a Mexican diocese, but were hands laid on you for that ordination in the city of Rome or Vatican City itself?
Yes, Cardinal Felici.
So, how did you go from being ordained for Mexico in Rome, expecting to live a long time in Rome, and then you get sent to pastoral work in San Juan de los Lagos, a diocese outside of Guadalajara?
That's a very good question. Here's a very good answer. The bishop, my archbishop, had turned 74. So this was going to be his last year as bishop, because they have to retire at 75, or at least present their resignation. He called me to Mexico for his last year. Why? Because he said, a number of the clergy, the priests here, are asking, who are you, right? We have you on the list of a priest for San Juan de los Lagos, but nobody knows who you are, or very few. So I would like you to come back here for my last year as bishop. And then you can return to Rome and continue. Right?
Yes.
As much as I disliked the very idea, I could not say it didn't make sense. It made sense.
Sure.
It made sense. So against my will, I went. And I think you can see that, you'll see it in the new book anyway. Not kicking and screaming, but really I was not happy. Right?
Yes. But even there, your life as a pastoral priest at this point is once again very extraordinary. As I'm doing the old version of your book, and can we say the name of the new one that's coming out yet or not?
We can.
Okay, so the one I'm reading right now is Society of Judas. Your new one coming out is going to be...
And It Was Night.
And It Was Night. One of the things as I'm reading this that really strikes me is the 1970s was only 40 years after the persecution in Mexico stopped. And if you could recount for the audience the deathbed conversion of El General, as you call him, would you be able to tell us that story?
It's long.
Let's do it, because I think it's worth it to hear.
I was in the town of Tepoztlan. Tepoztlan is a very important town because it was where the revolution began. It was also noted for the Battle of Tepa. Upward to 8,000 men were killed, right, toward the end of the Cristiada. Fantastic people who lived in that area, the whole area, but especially in that town. They were, we say, Católicos de hueso colorado, down to the bone, right? Catholic to the bone. Anyway, I had moved to that town after going back to Mexico for that year. And after certain months, I got to know people and became friendlier and not exactly elated to be there, but not I wasn't unpleasant about it, let me put it that way. I made friends with a doctor in town, Dr. Juan Martín del Campo, a wonderful man. I say this much to his credit. He's the only doctor that I know personally who died poor. And he died poor because he gave his entire life to the service of others. And most people left his office not only with a diagnosis, but with free medication. Right? He was just a truly good man. And he was a very active Knight of Columbus. Right? The Knights of Columbus became strong in Mexico because of the Cristiada.
Sure.
Right? Anyway, he called me. I got a call, let me just put it that way, from the hospital one afternoon at about 2 o'clock, I suppose. And I answered the phone. They needed a priest at the hospital. All right. Put on my cassock, surplice, stole, brought the Blessed Sacrament, oils, the whole thing, ready for confession and extreme unction. I always gave extreme unction in the old rite.
Good.
It just made much more sense, and people were happy with it. It seemed serious. It seemed more serious. And it was.
Shouldn't laugh at that.
I got to the hospital, and Dr. Juan Martin del Campo was waiting for me. And he said, it was very funny because in those days and in those times, these are educated Catholics in their faith. They really knew their faith and they practiced their faith.
Yes.
He spoke to me in whispers because I had the Blessed Sacrament.
Oh,
and
beautiful.
He said, the man who's waiting for you is in room 107. Right? I said, who is he, or what is he? He said, I said, he called for a priest. He said, I called you. I was on the phone. It was me who called you. It wasn't the hospital, it was me. He said, I've been his doctor for the last 6 months. He has hours left to live, maybe 2-3 hours. Mm-hmm. And I said, how can you be so sure? And he said, because his gangrene has already set in. He said, he should die any time now of a heart attack and he said the pain is terrible, and that's it. And he does not permit his legs to be cut off. Right, that's it. All right. And I said, I said, where's the man who called for the priest, who wanted the priest? He said, I didn't say he called for a priest. I said, there's a man who needs a priest.
I remember that from the book. Yeah, very different, as we're going to see in a minute.
Different.
Very different.
So I went down to his room, and he told me also before, he said, rumor has it that he was among the soldiers who executed, I can't remember his name, Father, I should be ashamed of myself. He's one of the saints that were just canonized. Father so-and-so from San Julian,
okay,
from a town nearby. You know the picture of the priest with full vestments.
Yes.
Right, come on, and the soldiers in front of him.
Yes.
This was one of the soldiers.
Incredible.
Right. He said, rumor has it. Right. I went to the room. Outside the room was his wife, common law wife, and it seemed like a dozen children, but they were all in their 50s, right? And older maybe, certainly older. And they were there, this whole group of people, very happy to see me. And it was the oldest son who warned me about the lion in the lion's den that I was about to enter. And he said he didn't call for a priest, he doesn't want a priest, but he needs a priest. Now these are the children who want their father to get to heaven.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And the mother was just this beautiful Mexican lady who you could see suffered an entire lifetime with this man, right? Anyway, she had all of her children baptized, First Communion of the Sacraments, unbeknownst to her husband. He was off on campaigns or what have you, right? So I said, fine, so then you know the rosary? Yes, we know the rosary. Good. I said, you pray the rosary, right? You pray the rosary, and I'll go in and see what I can do. As soon as I opened the door, I could still see the room. As soon as I opened the door, there's this figure of a man on a bed in front of me this way, the window right behind him, and I see these two black legs on white sheets, black legs. And he was in a lot of pain. They had given him everything they could for pain, but that's it. We're talking about a man about 82 or 84 years old, something like that. I approached him. When he saw who I was, I wouldn't begin to repeat. He called me things that I didn't know could exist. Horrible, horrible. And to say that he swore like a soldier was absolutely true.
I remember from the first version of your book that's getting a little whitewashed for part 2.
Well, I'm taking out all of the swearing.
Yeah.
Because it was scandalous to many people. If it was scandalous to them, you should have seen what I was feeling anyway. Because you're just hit with, you're not expecting to be hit over the head and slapped across the face and thrown out, right?
And I hope you don't mind me adding this from your book, but why did we have a general from against the Cristeros and then a very pious wife? The answer from your book was he kidnapped her as a 15-year-old.
Was very common practice. Very common practice. If a man, the machismo in Mexico is dying now. That's good and bad, okay?
Yeah.
But as Dr. Paul Vitz once said, the great psychologist said, machismo, at least you know who's a man.
Yeah, that's
if
right.
Nothing else, if nothing else. But anyway, I think she was about 15 years old when he just decided he liked this girl and kidnapped her.
He was 25, 30.
25, 30, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
In the middle of the Cristero War.
In the middle of the Cristero War, had all of these children. They were common law. They never got married. I don't even think civilly. Right?
Because he was against it, not her.
Oh,
by this point,
but
she
he had no
stayed.
time for religion.
Yeah.
No time for religion at all.
In fact, except for killing priests.
The soldiers in the Cristiada, the government soldiers, were viciously anti-Catholic. I mean, you had to be a soldier.
Yeah.
You were out hunting priests.
That's right.
You were killing nuns. You were closing convents. You were burning churches.
So you're showing up at the deathbed of a priest killer.
So they say. They tell me.
That's what they say, yeah.
But there was
Mexican Spanish can put a lot in
it was
passive
urgent enough
voices.
for the doctor to call me.
Yes.
Right. Anyway, after the swearing, did you ever have your knees go out?
I felt them get wobbly, but never fully
right?
way out.
Well, that didn't happen to me often in life. Maybe a couple times that I was really afraid of something. I felt my knee. It wasn't that I was afraid. I was so angry. There was this burst of anger that this ingrate,
Of course.
would have a priest in front of him at the moment of death and treat a priest this way. It just. Right.
All these cuss words you've never heard before.
I'm only a year and a half a priest.
And these cuss words that you've never heard before are directed to you, not just in general. They're
Not in
directed
general,
to you.
very specifically to me. Very specifically. Anyway, I don't know why exactly, but I just froze. And moved one way or the other, just froze. And he was shouting at me to get out. Things calmed down, there was a little bit of silence. I started to speak again, and again the shouting to get out. In no uncertain terms. No uncertain terms. And I could hear the rosary going on outside with their family. It was a very strange position to be in. The long and the short of it was, after, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, very awkward minutes, we started a dialogue, and I think the best that I could do for the dialogue was what I wrote in the book. But it was a back and forth. It was still insulting, but now he had gotten down to insulting on principle. You got a dying man whose dying thoughts and in his dying breath are going to be anti-Catholic, anti-God, and hated God.
Yes.
Hated God just as much as he hated the Catholic Church.
I remember
right?
that.
That's it. Anyway, he got done with his rampage, I guess you would call it. As well as I could, I answered with yes and no answers, right? And started trying to engage him in a conversation. It didn't work. And finally I said to him, I'll tell you what. This wasn't really true, but I told him anyway. I said, I'm finished for the day. I said that my day's duties were finished. I had nothing else to do. I had my breviary also with me. And I said, with your kind permission, I'm going to take this chair over here, green chair, never forget it. And I'm just going to take a seat, and I'm not going to say another word, not going to bother you at all. Nothing at all. He brought up during the rants that he was on, my Jesuits. He said, taught by Jesuits. How he knew that it was taught by Jesuits, I don't know. They had a particular hatred for the Jesuits, right? Anyway, I said, as I sat down, I was going toward the chair, I said, those Jesuits that educated me failed on one thing. They never told me specifically how a man goes to hell. It's something I think that they meant to say that you had to see it, but I've never seen that. I've never seen how a man goes to hell. The rest of my day is free. Let me just take this chair over here and watch how a man actually goes to hell. I want to see that. And I promise I won't bother you one bit, not a bit more. I won't say anything. I'll be quiet. He said nothing, and I moved slowly toward that chair, sat down in the chair. And I remember talking to the Blessed Sacrament.
Which you had on your person.
Exactly, around my neck. And I remember saying to our Lord, well, this is as far as I can go. I'm running out of anything else to say and of anything else to do. The man is completely belligerent. He's not moving. This is as far as I can go. So if you want him, he's yours, but there's nothing more I can do. Now, when you said to him, I'm going to sit down and watch a man go to hell, yes, there was a reaction, there was a flinch. Yeah.
But were you nervous when you said that?
You know, God forgive me, you want the truth, the absolute truth? I'm going to tell you something. I did want to see it. I did want to see how that happens.
Really?
Yeah, if he wasn't going to move and go to hell, I wanted to watch how a man goes to hell. I had never seen it. Never seen it. I had, even as a young priest, I'd helped quite a number of people die. And they were always looking for salvation and looking for help and great confessions and die with the Blessed Sacrament.
So even though 90% of you wanted to see him saved,
oh, I wanted to see him saved, of course, but that wasn't going to happen.
Because he was so off the.
It wasn't going to happen. The man just told me things about my genealogy that nobody has ever invented since.
Yeah, I was doing your audiobook driving back from the coast to your house today, and I've never heard that many cuss words in the audio in any time in my life as what he said to you.
Yeah, he really didn't want me there.
It's unbelildable.
let me just put it lightly. He really.
It's the most filthy things I've ever heard.
Yeah, it was filthy, vile.
Good thing you're cleaning up in the new book.
Well, I had to, otherwise I wouldn't. Nobody'd read it.
Nobody.
It was
not,
really
not good
boring.
Catholics, at least.
But I'll tell you one thing: those people who would be scandalized reading it, I'd like to see them stand up and take it, because that's exactly what was said.
So here you have a general who is fighting at least against the Catholics in the Cristero War. He's cussing out the church, cussing out God, cussing out you, and you have nothing else to say, and you say, I'm going to sit down and watch a man go to hell.
Yeah. I said, let me, if that won't ruin your day, you know, you're going there anyway, could I watch? And there was no answer. I took a seat. I said in prayer to our Lord, you want something done, the move is up to you. This is as far as I can go. And there was an awkward silence. Again, I'm hearing the rosary still from outside. And we started, he asked something. He asked a question, maybe even a stupid question. But we started to talk. And it wasn't about religion. I can't remember exactly the conversation, but it had nothing to do with religion or the priest or the confession or nothing like that. And I stood up and moved a little bit closer. And we started talking and talking and talking. I remember going through as well as I could. You got the man dying. So you're not going to get into a philosophical discourse with him, of course. But I said, I admitted to him that there was an awful lot wrong with the Catholic Church because he hated the church so. And I know I'd never had an encounter like that with that much hatred. I know people who don't care for the church or they've had bad experiences or whatever. This was pure hatred. It was almost the reason he was a soldier. It was the reason for his being was to be anti-Catholic. anti-God, anti-God. Anyway, during the persecution of the church, they did horrendous things to our altars, with prostitutes, with desecrations, horrible. And I knew this man had been part of that. He's not going to stand on the sidelines for that. He was a participant. We started talking, and I said, you know, I can help you. I asked him, did you ever kill a man? And the silence was a yes. The silence was a yes. Because if you hadn't killed a man, no, of course not. Right? Silence was a yes. Little by little, we were actually into the commandments. And I said, you know, General, I stole a line from Fulton J. Sheen. I love Fulton J. Sheen. Made my retreat with him, not with him personally, on video cassette for diaconate and priesthood. I said, you could be like Dismas. You could steal heaven. Even right now, you could steal heaven. Why would you chance missing out on heaven just to maintain a hatred? Why would you do that? And little by little, he began to soften. You know what else happened? Helped an awful lot? He was in horrible pain. Horrible pain. And there was nothing more that could be given to him. The morphine was, if they gave him any more morphine, they'd have killed him. Horrible pain. And his legs, you've got to be in a bad place to want your legs to be cut off so that you can stop suffering. Imagine? That's where it was. And he said, oh, that was it too, I'm missing a part. He said, nobody's dying today. Nobody's dying today. And I said, that's when I said, could I stay here and watch how a man goes to hell? He said, nobody's dying today. Get the F out of here, right? I said, oh, no. There you're wrong. There you're wrong. Somebody is dying today. You're dying today. I said, listen, I ran into your doctor, Dr. Juan Martin del Campo, on the way in here. He was waiting for me at the entrance to prepare me for you. He said, you're dying today. As a matter of fact, he said you had maybe 2, maybe 3 hours to live. I said, have you taken a good look at your legs? They're black. I put in the book because it came to mind. They looked like 2 exclamation points. That's exactly, I'll never forget that. And they just boom on this sheet. I said, you're going to die soon. The gangrene, I said, you're a soldier. You know what gangrene is. You've seen it. That's what you're going to die of. Actually, the doctor said you weren't going to die of gangrene, you'd die of a heart attack. It would get to your heart and you would die of that real soon. So you see, I'm right and you're wrong on that. There is someone going to die today, it's you. So I'll just stay here and just watch. We started talking. I leave that dialogue to the book. That dialogue is the best that I could come up with. There were some dialogues that I thought were so important in the book that I thought about them for days, for weeks, for months. Did I say this? Did I say that? I wanted to get it down. The dialogue that I've got in the book, the back and forth, was as best as I could remember.
And that's the upcoming book, And It Was Night.
And It Was Night. Right?
Probably be published in the next...
I'm hoping the next 3 months.
Next 3 months.
I'm hoping.
So I think it's September 2024 now. Hoping it's going to be released by the end of the year, maybe. I would beginning of 2025.
I would hope in January of 25. And the long and the short of it was, he gave me his confession without giving me his confession, right? And you know how I don't know if you were taught this way, but when people were in such pain and couldn't speak and their thoughts are all over it because they are dying. It's a flood of emotions and everything else, even to the most wicked. We were taught always to give your hand, and they were to squeeze your hand for yes, right? Well, that's what we did. I went through the 10 Commandments. I stated the commandment. First commandment is this. That would mean this, not to put anyone, anything at all in God's place. Have you done that? Have you put people, places, things in God's place? There's a little squeeze. Second commandment, don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Well, I said that would be profanity. I said, are we safe on that one? I do have to. Well, we got through the whole thing. Could you imagine? I'm just thinking right now. Could you imagine if I had said, "Have you ever sinned against creation? The new sins that we have, solidarity."
Seriously.
I mean, could you imagine how insane that would be?
Did you not recycle?
Did you not recycle? He would throw me. He'd get up out of the bed and throw me out himself. Anyway, we got through that. I gave him absolution. Called in his family. Gave him First Communion, a fragment of the host. Confirmed him. I asked his wife, were they married? They were never married. That was the first time I married someone on his deathbed, right? The wife is there, all of the children are there.
Civilly married, but never in the church.
I don't even know if they were civilly married. I don't even know that. I don't even know that. But they certainly weren't married in the church. And then I'm saying to myself, well, to me, I'm saying, extra unction? Do I give extra unction? Extra unction? He's already gotten confirmation, this and that. I said, well, yes, it's that. But it occurred to me, and I turned to his wife, this beautiful old lady, Mexican lady. And I said, excuse me, was he ever baptized? She said, not that I know. And of course, who is she? I mean, she'd think, well, the priest knows what he's doing. Should I tell him he's never been baptized?
Sure.
The priest must know. And I said, he's never been baptized? I said, that way, all right. The long and the short of it was, he received every sacrament that day except holy orders.
You baptized him after.
I baptized him after all that.
If I remember from the book, if I remember from the book, Father, he admitted he was never baptized, or he didn't think so.
I think I asked him as well as he could, and then I'm asking his wife. They had religion had no part of his life whatsoever. It was not permitted in home and everything else. So, but I never met anyone in Mexico at that time who had not been baptized.
I see.
Even from the most anti-clerical families, you were baptized. Mm-hmm. It's like you just were. You were given a name. You were given a patron saint.
Right.
If for no other reason, it was so that you'd have a name, right? But baptism was always done. So I never thought, I'd never met anyone who wasn't baptized. Not in Mexico, not in that Catholic country. Even though they were anti-clerics. The president of Mexico, who was one of the greatest Freemasons in the world, anti-clerical, hated priests, Elias Calles, was baptized.
Even Elias, huh?
Yes, they're all baptized. And they all sent their children to Catholic schools. You know,
it's cultural, yeah.
But anyway, that was all done. That was all done in one afternoon. And it was the most joyous afternoon in the world. And he died. He died there with his wife, his children.
After receiving 6 sacraments from you,
yes,
including baptism.
Yes. Yeah, everybody was crying. But I don't know, crying. He must have been a holy terror as a father and a husband. I mean, just a horrible man. And
Were you crying too?
No, I was not crying.
No.
Not that I remember. I was filled with tremendous emotion and with let me put it this way, with a strength. There was a strength that God had used me to do something, to really change a life, to save a man from the mouth of hell.
Yes.
Because he was right there.
Oh,
he was right there.
A horrible person.
And to have snatched that soul away from the devil, who was waiting eagerly for it, I felt very, very good and very strong. Strong in the Lord, not me, but strong in the Lord. I remember going home after that. Did I see the doctor after? I saw him the next day. And the man died, of course. The general died. I went back to the retreat house where I was staying and collapsed.
Yeah.
I got into my room and just collapsed on my bed. I was drained, absolutely drained. I had never had such an intense moment of anything in my life.
If I remember from the book, you woke up very refreshed the next day because God gave you a soul.
It was a marvelous experience, and all of the experiences were marvelous, because as much as I detested going to Mexico because it was ruining my plans.
Sure.
Important me, right? It was then that I started really being a priest.
Yes.
I could have been in the Roman Curia, and I could have become a soulless nitwit pushing papers for the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
And now I'm a soulless nitwit, but no. It's remarkable experiences. On Thursdays, for example, just a quick, on Thursdays, I brought the Eucharist to all the sick.
Okay.
And there was a driver, a man from the parish, who would drive you to all of the places so you didn't have to worry about driving and everything. You'd walk into these homes that were shacks, and some very wealthy people too, right?
Sure.
But you into some of them. You know, you asked, did I cry? Yeah, but you cry for joy.
Sure.
You're not crying sadness. I remember going to many places, and when you would walk in the front gate. It was just a wall and a gate, and you walked into somebody's garden. But the entire pathway, all the way to the sickbed, was strewn with rose petals.
Of course, because not because of you, because of
there
was love of the priesthood, but primarily because
the Blessed Sacrament is visiting.
Yes,
Jesus Christ is visiting, right? But I'm looking at all of it.
Did someone greet you at the door with a candle too?
Yes, of course. And these are peasants these are simple people, but they knew what was sacred. They knew what was holy.
Absolutely.
They hadn't forgotten yet. I think today they've forgotten already. But those gestures, they would cause you to cry.
Absolutely.
They were just so beautiful. And you'd say, their faith in God, their faith in the Blessed Sacrament, their faith in everything is greater than mine. I pulled strength from them. And grew in my own faith. I mean that, because I saw people who not only talked the talk, they walked the walk. Most of them had relatives who were tortured and murdered during the Cristiada.
Yes, Father, one of the things that I'm reminded of as I hear you talk about the faith of the people, now the Novus Ordo of the 3 prayers before the priest receives Holy Communion that was in the Old Mass, the New Mass only has the last of the 3, but I believe it's number 2 of the 3 in the traditional Latin Mass. The priest is looking at the Eucharist before receiving it, and he says, "Look not upon my faith, but the faith of your church." And a lot of times at that moment, I'll think through 14 years post-ordination for me of people who I think have had greater faith. And I'm literally asking Jesus in the Eucharist to look on their faith instead of, I mean, I certainly believe this is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. I don't mean there's doubt. But I know there's people with higher levels than me of faith, hope, and charity. And my mind kind of does the Rolodex thing as I'm asking God to, don't just look on my faith and hope and charity, look on theirs. So it's even built, I guess I'm agreeing with you, it's even built into the Mass that the priest is humbled before receiving the Eucharist, that there are people much closer to Christ than him.
Yes, we were going to talk about the orphanage.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you.
But I'm going to tell you something. When I began the orphanage, we had the Mother Superior of the Italian nuns there for 5 months to get the sisters situated, to get everything else. The day that she left, what you just said reminded me of that. The day that she left and went back to Rome and left these 3 young sisters, Italian nuns, with me, I was 29, and they were 30, 32, 33. All of a sudden, and we've got all these kids. I had 12 boys in one house and the girls were staying in another place. I said, oh my God, it's up to me.
It was all on your
This
shoulders.
is up to me.
Yes.
I don't have somebody who's 70 years old who knows all of the answers.
Yeah.
And if I need any money or something, she would have access to. No, it's gone. She's gone. The support is gone. It's you.
Yep.
That at times, and this may sound a little bit crazy to people, but at times you're off oscillation, the up and down of your faith. There are days that you have no doubt of anything and you're stronger than a bull in the faith. And there are days that your faith is tested and you wonder if this is all worth it. You just do. I do.
Sure.
I do.
Yeah, and that's right, because Cardinal Newman said 1,000 difficulties does not equal 1 doubt. So we can be avoiding voluntary doubt and still at times say, but is it worth it?
But you also, you have to remember, the devil is the devil. He doesn't stop. He doesn't stop.
He doesn't sleep.
And we have at least one dedicated to us. As we have a guardian angel, we also have a guardian devil. He's right with us all the time, trying to foul up the works. But what I'm saying is, it's a frightening thing when all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, this depends on my faith? I've got 500 people here in front of me, and they're all looking at me. This depends on me? It is a consoling factor that looking out on them, you can see this, you've been at this home, you've been at that home, you know this person, you know that person, from their talks and everything, you know that their faith is also solid.
Yes.
Especially in those moments that you're a little bit on a decline, you know it's there, right? This is the importance of community. This is the importance of ecclesia.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
It is.
And when I had heard you started an orphanage, I thought you just woke up one morning and said, I'm going to do a good work and start an orphanage. And as I read your book, the next book rather, I realize these street kids just plopped in your lap. They're walking into the church in the morning and they're sleeping in the pews because there's nowhere else to go. So you bring this notion to your archbishop to start an orphanage. Tell us about just these kids coming out of nowhere, why you started the orphanage.
I arrived on the Feast of Saints Peter and Paul.
What year?
79.
That makes sense, because 78 was the whole drama in Rome.
Right.
Yep.
79. That's right, because it would have been the academic year 80, right? 79, 80. So I arrived there in 79. That was the Archbishop's last year. And because it was summer, kids were everywhere. Children were everywhere. They were on the streets. They were in the parks. They were in their homes. You could hear children all over the place because it was summertime. There was no school. And the parish, the Sagrada Familia, the Sacred Family, Holy Family parish, was packed with kids for catechism. Catechists, these men and women, especially women, who were trained, and when I say trained, I mean they knew their catechism by heart, right? And they had been teaching, some of them 30, 40, and 50 years, right? And they would get groups of kids, maybe, I don't know, no more than 10 in a group, and work with them on catechism. These kids knew their catechism like you couldn't believe. It was fantastic.
Really?
Yes, it was fantastic. When you have dedicated, why? Because these men and women who were catechists had been that way. They were forced to become catechists during the persecution.
I see.
There were no more schools. There wasn't an infrastructure that was going to help. So if their faith was to continue, it had to be through them. And that's when they became, and they wore that as a badge. They were very proud. She's the catechist of San Francisco. This is the catechist. He's the catechist of, yeah, very good. Anyway, these kids were just everywhere. You would go into the parish church, and it was a small area, the whole place. So you've got kids all over the place and screaming and this and that. I had to go out and ask them to be quiet for me to say Mass. One day I arrived, we had early morning Mass, I think it was 6 o'clock, and I arrived just a little bit before normal. I would usually arrive 10 minutes early to open the sacristy and everything else. I might have arrived 15 minutes early this day, and two of the boys that I had made altar boys, Luis Fernando and Jorge, were already inside. They were already inside the building. There was an interior patio. I asked them, how did you get in? What are you doing here? Well, all that time they had been sleeping upstairs in the community room. So all of this time they had been sleeping upstairs in the community room every night. They were not going back to an orphanage that was in existence for boys for a lot of reasons, a lot of bad reasons. And I took them under my wing. I think Luis Fernando at that time was 9. Jorge, his sidekick, they were each other's sidekick, was also 9. And I was staying at a retreat house run by Mexican nuns. And the superior there was Sister Petra, magnificent, a saint. I asked her if I could have a room for the two boys to stay. Yes, she gave me one. Well, I started taking care of them. They followed me because they're out of school, right? So I had masses out on ranches, here, there's and the other. And these were my altar boys. And they were great. They were great. When school came around, it was time for school, they didn't want to go back to the orphanage that they were in, which was a horrible place. I can't even begin to describe it.
In the book.
Horrible.
Yeah.
I think I described it well in the book.
Beaten with a hose, I think.
Yeah, they were beaten, and there were no toilets. It's just horrible. Anyway, I went to see the Archbishop, and I asked him. I said, like these two boys, there are many other children in Tepoztlán who are, for all practical purposes, abandoned. He said, and what? I said, well, I'd like to give them a home. He said, but I thought you were interested in going back to Rome. I said, oh, now I see his play. I see how he was playing it, but I didn't at that time. And I said, I am. He said, well, how are you going to give them a home and go back to Rome? I said, well, I think I can build an orphanage, a small orphanage, right, in 6 months. Why would it take more than 6 months? He said, 6 months? He said, do you know Padre Cuellar in Guadalajara? I said, yes, I know the Institute, don't know him. He said, well, he built his orphanage, it took him 35 years. I said, yes, but I think I've got the influences here, I can talk. I've got people who will back me up. Well, he said, yes, go ahead. I went back to see him a month later. I had gone to see a number of people in town who had land, and I wanted a donation of land. Nobody would donate land. Nobody would donate land. And so I was ready to throw in the towel. And the Archbishop said, and my Archbishop was a saint. And I thought, stupidly, naively, but also stupidly, that all bishops were this way. I really did. I had such a relationship with him, it was fantastic. I could go to see him anytime. I may have to wait 10, 15 minutes. The door's always open. I said, this is fantastic, to have that support. Anyway, I went back to see him and I said, it's off, I can't get land and I can't afford that much money to buy land. The land was, you think it's cheap in Mexico and in this township. Believe me, it was not. He said, and if I would give you the land? I said, where would you give me the land? He said, right outside the Colegio Morelos. He said, there's a plot of land. He said, it would be enough. It would be enough for you. And if it's not big enough, you can take that land and sell it and buy the land you want. It's right in the town, so its plus value was high. I couldn't believe it. I went to go see the land. It was a garbage dump. It was a garbage dump. It was abandoned, heaps of garbage.
Oh, literally garbage dump.
Oh, literally garbage, yes, with goats eating tin cans and whatever they eat. It's just a horrible place. 14 eucalyptus trees, those horrible, sad trees. You know. But I saw the potential, and so we started building.
You took it.
I took it. We got to I had 12 boys, and I think 6 girls. The girls lived in the retreat house with the sisters. At that point, I went back to Rome, talked to the Italian sisters, a group of Italian sisters, a congregation that I knew that I thought were very good. They were the real deal, and they were at that time. Anyway, 3 of them came over and helped me start this whole thing, and we started building an orphanage. Well, at the end of a year, when it was time to go back to school in Rome, I came and asked the Archbishop for another year. I said, I need 1 more year. I can't finish this. And he said, well, you have the year. Go ahead. And for whatever reason, his last year, they didn't, when he was 75, they just didn't immediately take him away. He was remaining there. He said, go ahead. You've got the time that I'm here. Right? Well, it turned into, I'm not going to tell you, it turned into 6 years, 5 years anyway, 5 years of building, of maintaining, of getting kids to school. I didn't want the kids to be in school at the orphanage. I wanted them to go outside to school, right? I wanted the orphanage to be their home, not an institution. And it was fantastic.
And how many orphans did you get up to?
148.
Incredible.
148.
How did you get a French bakery attached? I missed that because I'm not that far.
Well, when I was in Rome, there were a group of nuns that I knew, the missionaries of the missionaries, the working missionaries. They have a restaurant very near the Pantheon called L'Eau Vive in French. That's where I had my ordination dinner actually first Mass. And these sisters run restaurants, and the money they get from their restaurants runs their apostolates. And their apostolates they're dressed secularly. They don't have a habit, a religious habit. To prisons, to teach catechism out in the farmlands and everything else. Very dynamic ladies, but they don't ask you for 1 penny.
I see.
And their restaurants are some of the finest in the world.
And so there's an orphanage with almost 150 kids in it, a French bakery, and what was the third part?
French bakery and a French restaurant.
And a French restaurant.
Right. And then we needed a ranch.
Ranch, right.
Why? For a number of reasons, but one of the reasons was the boys that we had, these little boys were growing up. And they were now 14, 15, 16, right? They're now in high school. Well, I thought, if we had a ranch close by, and it's another long story, but I got it it was providential that I got the land for it. We could have cattle. We could have chickens. We could have turkeys. We could feed the orphanage. And the boys were gung-ho. They couldn't wait to have a ranch, right?
So Father, there's so many other things in your upcoming book, And It Was Night, that I want to get into. The cartels, the triple betrayals and everything. The orphanage is just a launching point for, like I said at the beginning, the most exciting life of a priest I've ever heard. I was hoping to get in more questions, but you have another interview here starting in a few minutes. Just to our audience, what's a little teaser you'd like to give on your upcoming book, And It Was Night?
Well, I think if you would ask me in a word what the book is about, that word would be betrayal. Do you remember a movie not too many years ago called The Perfect Storm?
Sure, it took place in my alma area,
Really?
Boston. Well, yeah, I graduated Boston College, and it was a New England story.
Well, I thought that story of the storm was fantastic. And if that title had not been used for that storm, I would use it for my book.
I see.
Because the betrayal, you talked about a triple betrayal. The betrayal started on 3 different fronts without me knowing that it was going on.
Almost at the same time?
Almost at the same time. So when it hit, it was explosive. 3 different parties came together to make a super duper double zhishka triple whatnot betrayal.
Yes.
Right? The one that you couldn't get out of.
And something you said to me.
Or could you?
Right. That's the teaser. And something you said to me, I think you were quoting Marini, but something you said to me is, an enemy can't betray you, only a friend can betray you.
Yeah, look, I did, I have a copy of Perhaps Love, right? It's a short book that I put on my thesis on friendship. So we take Aristotle, De Amicitia, and Aelred of Rivaux, De Amicitia, on spiritual friendship. And it's a fantastic study of friendship love. It's really remarkable. I love it. It's the basis to my spiritual life. It actually is. Anyway, the long and the short of that is...
You mean like friendship with Christ?
Friendship with Christ, friendship with other priests.
Yes.
Friendship with lay people I know, men and women. But it's on a spiritual level. It's not just, how are you?
Sure.
No, it's deep to where you would give your life for somebody. For few people you do that. Christ did it for everyone. And he would do it again. This is remarkable. But only he could do that by being God. However, I learned an awful lot about friendship. And one of the rules of friendship is everything that's wonderful also has a very dark, deep, negative side to it. The Catholic Church is wonderful. Wonderful. I tell you that with all my heart and soul. Wonderful. It has a dark, deep, dark side to it also. That's evil. Why? Because where there's good, there has to be evil. Where the greatest good is in the world, the devil has built his tent across the street. You're not going to let that just stay there. All alone? Goodness all alone and wonderful and dazzling? No. He has to get in there. That's why when we look at the investigations of the Vatican, they find so much corruption. Of course there's corruption. How naive to think there is not corruption. Right?
What would you say to the priests out there?
But let me just finish this. Yeah. You asked me a question, and the question is this. Only a friend can betray you. An enemy cannot betray you. An enemy is not a friend. Only a friend can betray you. An enemy can kill you, but he can't betray you. A friend can betray you. And the difference is that betrayal, unlike the friend murdering you, killing you, demolishing you, unlike that, the enemy doing that, I should say, the friend kills you and leaves you alive to die again and again and again. It's horrible. Absolutely. It's horrible because it's diabolical.
Yes.
The betrayal is diabolical. And what did Christ die of? He died of a betrayal.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can go on greater and bigger things, but it was a betrayal. And there was a saint in the Middle Ages who described Christ's betrayal. The reason Christ wept, he put, in the garden was over Judas, over that betrayal that it was coming up. Because he had already called these and graduated these men to friendship.
And we had talked about off the air, that scene in Braveheart, that this unstoppable warrior, the thing that makes him lose all of his, or a good chunk of his fighting spirit is that betrayal. I mean, he obviously in the movie dies a very courageous death, but if you notice when, is it Robert the Bruce? I can't remember who it is, when the helmet comes off and he sees who did it, he never regains that full fighting spirit. And priests like you and me who've been betrayed by other priests and bishops, I think it's very hard for lay people out there to understand. They'll say, well, you just be obedient no matter what. But they don't understand, behind the canonical promises of obedience, you also have a covenantal relationship. And when someone breaks that, it's a wound you carry for your whole life.
That relationship is sacrosanct. And when it's destroyed, you've not only destroyed the person and yourself. The betrayer betrays himself by doing this too.
Right.
but you've also destroyed the relationship. You've destroyed person number one, person number two, person number three, the relationship. Do we see Trinitarian here? Yes, we do. That's why I'm saying the relationship of friendship is Trinitarian. It is God living within us. It's the way God lives on earth in a Trinitarian form. And friendship is what destroys it. That's why it's so evil.
You mean betrayal is what destroys it?
What am I saying? Friendship destroys, betrayal destroys friendship.
Yes.
That's why it's so evil.
Yes.
It destroys God's image. That's what it does.
And I think because we live in a time when it's the liberals that talk about friendship with Jesus and we traditionalists want to talk about how Jesus is God, we forget that there were great saints like St. Ignatius of Loyola who clearly recognized Christ first as God and Savior, but also this friendship is so intimate. And, well, that's what I find fascinating about your book. So we'll leave it at that because I know that you have some other things to get to, but I'd very much encourage people to get this when it's out, and it was night, because it shows what a priest who gave his whole heart for God and the apostolate went through, what the betrayal did to him, and you're still trucking along. You're still here with us today.
And I'm going to tell you something else too, and with this we'll end. I'm going to tell you something, and I mean this. I've been asked by a number of people to qualify this. The only way I can qualify is by saying it. These last years of my life, the last 20 years of my life, the last 10 years of my life have been the most enjoyable, the most fantastic, the most marvelous. I thought they were in my 20s and in my 30s. Yeah, they were all interesting, wonderful. This is the reward of having been faithful. I'm faithful with my own debilities included. I'm not perfect. I'm not the saint. But I've tried as well as I possibly could to stay the course in spite of, what is it? Faith of our Father in spite of dungeons, fire and sword.
Fire and sword,
right?
yes.
Well, boom, I had explosions on all sides. Just stay the course.
I mean, you're reaching so many people as a quote-unquote canceled priest. You're reaching so many people, and what would you say to the priests out there who are being betrayed by, say, their pastors or bishops who are ready to give up? What would you say as a 74-year-old priest looking back? Why would you tell them these last 10 years have been good, the best, even after what you've been through?
Well, because at the end of our lives, we're going to be rewarded with heaven. We believe that. Sometimes we believe it more and sometimes less, but we believe that, right? We're hopeful for that because, I keep telling people this, because in the end we know who wins, right? That I've been happy these last years of my life is an extra reward. I really believe that, because I also really believe something extraordinary was required of me to survive.
Yes.
The betrayals were terrible. They were life-threatening.
Literally life-threatening.
Well, they took lives. They also took lives along the way.
We're talking fire bombings and things.
Yeah.
I remember this.
Yeah, it was...
So why didn't you give up?
I don't know. Was it Churchill who said that when you find yourself in a hole, keep digging? I don't know. You just keep going. You keep going. Don't stop. If you stop, you've doomed yourself. You've limited yourself. You've stopped yourself. If you keep going, there might be something at the end.
Yeah, Father, I remember when we were talking about this, I think the only way you could compare you and me to St. Peter was our stubbornness. That we don't think of that as a virtue, but, you know, Peter was chosen by Christ partly because of that stubbornness. Now, that became gilded in supernatural gifts, but I'm like you, one of the reasons I wouldn't give up is because they wanted me to.
A tinge of pride, but yes. And, you know, pride is also a good thing to have in yourself, a proper pride.
Not arrogance, but...
No, not arrogance. We fight against that because both you and I are perfect. So it's easy to be arrogant.
Perfect. Yeah.
No, perfect. We're perfect in every way. Lord, what is that song? Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. Yeah. No, because we're imperfect, of course. I'm being flippant. But the thing, too, is that you made a statement, maybe that's what St. Peter had. No, that's what he had. it's obvious in the Gospels that our Lord loved John more. John was more sympathetic, simpatico in the sense, in the Latin sense, simpatico. Peter was stubborn, and our Lord didn't entrust the leadership of his church to the man he loved the most. He entrusted it to the man who was most stubborn. Curious, eh?
It is very curious.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we're supposed to be stubborn in the ways of the faith, to hold true to it.
Absolutely.
Hold true to it. Don't sit down and negotiate because you want to be lovey-dovey with people and get no. The faith is the faith. Other things are other things.
That's what a true pope does.
I believe so.
A true pope. Father, thank you so much for all that I've learned from you while staying here, and thank you for your time.
You're most welcome.
God bless you.
God love you, kiddo.
He said something really like, because I want to see this. Okay, it's speaking because I don't want this to like start distorting.
He means loud.
But I won't laugh.
Of course you won't. You always laugh. You're
I
going to
know.
say, imagine this. And